All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and another episode in our series of Manifest Your Destiny from Dr. Wayne W. Dyer, the nine spiritual principles for getting everything you want. But really, it's the nine spiritual principles for becoming a manifester and learning how to create your life on purpose. But it's not so much about manifesting money or getting rich or, manifesting a fancy car, but it's a process, psychological and a personal and a spiritual process of coming to know yourself in a new way and changing your perspective on life. This series has been fantastic so far. We started out in the beginning with the first principle, of course, which was becoming aware of your highest self. Within you is a divine capacity to manifest and attract all that you need or desire. This is such a powerful statement, Dr. Wayne Dyer tells us, that we should definitely contemplate it for some time. Most of what we are taught to believe about our reality conflicts with this statement, tells us that we can't do this, and this is something ridiculous and crazy. But he encourages us, however, that it is true, and you can come to know this for yourself. And so surrender any hesitation and let this thought enter into our consciousness. I have a divine ability to manifest and attract what I need or desire. Becoming aware of your highest self was the first step, and how to know yourself without any doubt. Hello, Beans. Hello, Beans. Oh, yeah, I left the microphone over here. There we go. Thank you for joining me, ladies and gentlemen, if you're just coming in. Beans is being a funny kitten. There we go. But once again, reading Dr. Wayne W. Dyer's Manifest Your Destiny for purposes of teaching, commentary, and expanding the mind so that through an increased awareness, we can hopefully increase the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us. And so the second principle, after coming to know your highest self, is learning to trust in yourself and trust in the wisdom that created you. And so this idea of trust is learning to trust, Dr. Wayne Dyer says, may be difficult in the beginning, and it is difficult for all of us because of the way that we've been conditioned. It will be an exercise, he says, in futility if you rely upon your mind to create trust. This is because the mind works on material problems by interpreting sensory data. So when turned towards spiritual matter, the mind attempts to come up with some kind of solution with intellectual answers by trying to use proofs or logic and theoretical reasoning. It demands assurance and proof to establish tangible results. But in contrast, the method of the heart, focused on spiritual understanding, is an intuitive recognition. So, not an intellectual process. This is something you feel, more of an emotional or an intuitive recognition of the value of love, Dr. Wayne Dyer says. Whereas the mind, on the other hand, attempts to know the spirit by setting up some kind of conditions that must be met logically for there to be this release of love. The heart employs intuitive love as its way. It is not a conclusion of reasoning. It is exactly the opposite. It's a way of spontaneity, as he says, not the result of bargaining with the intellect. The heart trusts the inner wisdom that it feels and spontaneously knows, whereas the mind demands specific evidence. And so then we went through the two theories of nature, or the two theories of God, which was very fascinating. The first theory of God being in the mechanistic view of nature, everything is an artifact made by a boss who has many different names. In the Western view, the boss is called God. This God is often depicted as a white bearded male who roams around the sky creating the natural world. In this theory, the world is a construct and God is the creator. or the constructor, the builder. The biblical God is usually seen as some kind of paternal, authoritarian, beneficent, in many ways tyrannical, a judge or like some kind of ruler that you have to. He keeps track of all things and knows precisely what everyone does when his laws are being broken. This is one of the theories of nature or God. And so this theory makes many people feel estranged, creating an attitude of separateness from God. Remember, it is all one. We are not separate from God, we are a part of it. And so this new perspective can allow us to begin to live in a new way. And so, once again, back to what Dr. Dyer was saying there, the more we feel separated from this God, the more we feel the need to create some way of feeling worthy. And so we create an idea of our importance based on externals, and this is the ego. Reliance on ego ultimately leads to more separation as life becomes a contest and a competition and, a battle or a struggle between us and this view of separation. So it's us against everything else. And this is survival instinctual programming. And so continuing now again with what Dr. Dyer is saying, we we begin to rely on this ego. And this leads us into a looping cycle of separation and battle and struggle. And so it's this us against them kind of attitude. People are categorized and evaluated, he says, on the basis of egonomics, which is a funny way to put it, which includes appearance, tradition, language, physical characteristics. But I believe that the most troubling thing built into this theory of nature, or this one, remember, we're looking at the two theories of God and nature here, is the impact that it has on our ability to operate from a strong position of self-trust and, believing that you are worthy and that you are connected to that which you desire when it comes back to manifesting. But, you know, the, to really get there, it begins to cause those feelings of the opposite. I'm not worthy. I am not good enough. I'm not a part of anything, and I'm just a terrible nothing. It begins to, the more you can transition through, remember, you change your thoughts, change your life. So if you change your perspective, the things that you look at change. Even though it could be the very same thing for somebody else standing next to you, but the way that you look at it changes it for you personally. And so this position of self-trust and self-worthiness and feeling worthy or feeling like that you are valuable is totally eliminated, and it's removed when we come from this perspective of that we are separate and we are not connected in this view of God and nature as it's something else out there, and we have to somehow live up to some kind of expectations. And so we end up with what we just went through. And so now continuing with what Dr. Dyer says, everything becomes subject to doubt with this perspective when God is a vindictive boss. This leads to the confusion of doubting everything because our opinions, feelings, and beliefs are untrustworthy in this scenario. So one can't even maintain trust in God because of the basic mistrust of ourselves. And if God, if you don't want to think about this as God, and that's the spiritual stuff, is to think of it just as nature or reality, whatever we are interacting with here in this existence. And so this view in this scenario, once again, we can't even trust reality, if you don't want to call it God. And then we can't trust ourselves. And back to what Wayne Dyer is saying, quote, and not trusting in God may be breaking one of the laws. It's a no-win situation. This theory of the untrustworthiness of nature, popular as it is absolutely incompatible with this process of becoming a manifester, or incorporating spiritual principles into your life in order to experience a better quality of life if you're not even interested in manifesting. But that's what this series is about. Once again, Manifest Your Destiny, Dr. Wayne Dyer. And so he says, when we're coming from this perspective of God or nature, reality, we cannot tune in to the power and the energy that we are a part of. Remember, the source and the cause for everything that is visible in the physical realm is a non-physical energy. If you zoom in all the way down, quantum particles, and the furthest you get, there's just waves of energy that constitutes all of the matter that we see. If you don't want to call this energy God, that's just fine, but there is this force, this universal organizing intelligence, grand organized design, God, whatever you want to call it. And this power, if we want to begin to tune in and harmonize, because it's acting within us all the time, we are manifesting whether we like it or not, but we're usually just not doing it on purpose or in a beneficial way for ourselves and our lives in the direction that we want to go. Another thing I love that Dr. Dyer talks about so often, hello, Beans. She's a video kitten. But is this congruency and trying to find con congruency as a way for creating more peace in your life, meaning that the way that you think being unaligned with the way that you feel and also unaligned with the way that you act. And if we can, which is very difficult for many of us, and but even just thinking about this and wanting to work on it is a step in the right direction. And so if you're here, thank you for being here. I love and appreciate each and every one of you that joins me and takes time out of your day. Remember, time and attention are our most valuable assets. So put them where they might be beneficial to you. I guess beneficial is the random word of the day. But so now that was this first view of God and nature as a mechanism, Dr. Dyer called it, but I will call it something separate from us. And then there is the second theory, nature as spontaneous and non-judging, Dr. Dyer titles it. In the spontaneous view, God is a universal intelligence, flowing through everything, inspiring the natural process to unfold. This is what's described by Lao Tzu 2,500 years ago in the Tao Te Ching and all the other ancient and spiritual philosophical works. I think this is part of the reason I'm so obsessed or fascinated or rapt by this is that there is this thing. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's like Atum, God, Tao. There's 1,000 different names, but it seems to be something that throughout all of time, for all of humanity, I mean, not saying everybody is searching after God, but it's for almost every culture throughout all of our history, there is this significance of trying to discover this thing that seems to be the most important thing underlying everything. And so I guess that seems really important to me. So once again, if you're here, thank you. In this spontaneous view, God is universal. It is a universal intelligence. The emphasis is on awareness of the divine nature in everything, rather than managing and controlling and pushing around and seeing everything is separate, but seeing this divine nature in everything and a connection. And so the life force, from this perspective, once again, the second perspective of God, nature, reality, is non-judgmental, and it is responsible for everything that we see, including everything that we don't see. Remember, the Hermetic philosophy taught us that there's the three great planes of reality, and you obviously already know them, I'm sure, which is the physical, and then the mental, and then the spiritual. And those are each broken down into 7 subcategories. Furthermore, those are broken down into 7 subcategories. That gets complicated, but that is a different series. We usually do that on Wednesdays, even though I skipped last week. But coming back to what Dr. Dyer is saying here, the life force, this energy force, this non-physical thing that is responsible for everything that we see and that we are, including ourselves. And so this force is non-judgmental. So if you're thinking it's favoring other people when it comes to manifesting, like I'm not getting nothing and everybody else is, there is no favor. It is non-judgmental. It doesn't care. So if you're thinking thoughts of I don't have enough, I am not worthy, it will say, okay, here you go. More of you don't have enough and more of you are not worthy. It just is like you can almost think about it like a mirror. But that I'm getting off track too much here, which we do anyways. If you've been here before, you know I tend to ramble. So thank you for being here once again. And this theory, though, the second theory of God and nature reality, instead of separate, God, or this life force, is universal. It is within all of us. It is non-judgmental, and it is responsible for everything. In this theory, for all of creation, Dr. Wayne Dyer words it. In this theory, nature is an unfolding, an unforced unfolding of all of life, life forms, and there is no, see, this is the big difference here of this perspective change, is there is no boss. There's no judge. There isn't, you're not separate from something that you're screwing up in your ways to that you're trying to live up to, and this whole idea of sin that they sold us. It's like sin was just an archery term. If you look at the translations and the interlinear versions of the original texts of the scriptures, but it was an archery term that meant a missing of the mark. And so when you shoot an arrow and you miss the mark, are you damned forever? No. You take your bow and you grab another arrow and you shoot for the mark again. And you get better over time. And damn, after a while, you're no longer missing the mark. But see, once again, there in this metaphor, there has to be an effort for hitting the mark. So if you're purposefully shooting at you know, the spectators off the side of the course, see, this would be an example of this misunderstanding of sin, a missing of the mark. I'm rambling again. Let us continue. I actually had no idea we were going to go here today. I was going to go into the next chapter, but this seemed to be important. And that's kind of how these happen anyways. It's just like whatever happens is good. And somehow I always end it. And last week, I ended the video 59 minutes. I'm like, there's nothing here showing me how long it's going. Somehow it always ends up being 59 minutes or right around there, 49, 58, an hour and two. I'm like, how do I accidentally do that? I don't know. Anyways, so the first view of God and nature was the boss, the separate. And the second view is the universal intelligence flowing through each and every one of us that is not a boss. Quote, rather than learning to manage and control the natural world, the impulse from this perspective is to trust it. God, in this theory, loves all things. And the other theory is judging certain things as terrible and other things as good. But that's obviously a human trait and characteristic, and it would be silly to apply our characteristics to God. But then in, the counter to that, to play the devil's advocate, there is the as above, so below, and the correlations as we learned in the Hermetic philosophy. However, human beings are an aspect of this God. Therefore, carriers of divinity. Christianity put it like you have the spark of divinity within you. And so, well, actually, the guru from Nazareth, you could call it, put it that way. There's a lot of other things going on in those texts. However, trusting is the key here. And so what we've done through what we've talked about here is build a possibility to have a belief or a reason in your, within you to trust in yourself. Because if God is something separate from you and it's out there and you have to live up to it, it's very difficult to see. It goes back to that you are untrustworthy. And if you can't trust yourself, then how can you even trust your judgment of being untrustworthy? And so, but when you are a part of it and it is you, and you are actually in that same sense, if it is universal, which means that there is nowhere that it is not. So it is in you and me and the birds and the trees and the plant, everything that we see, you can begin to feel a sense of trust in that, which is the second principle of manifesting. First was becoming aware of your highest self, knowing that you even have, this kind of, and coming to accept that, or willingly for a period of time to maybe experience this, suspend our disbelief of that. And then once we've done that, we can come into the second step, which is learning to trust in ourselves by using the factor of trusting in the wisdom that created us. And so if we can gain the perspective of that we are not separate from it, we can begin to do that. Hopefully. I mean, I'm not saying this is easy. Like you don't just read this and it happens for you. This is something like this is why I just pound it into my head all day or as often as I can, because it's like you need these constant reminders of, oh, yeah, all right, oh, yeah, new perspective. This is the way to think about it. I'm telling you, it's going to help you. Once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I like to try to keep it funny and not too heavy because these subjects can be extremely heavy. And so if you're getting value, smash the like button, leave me a comment, let me know what you think, and thank you again. Rather than learning to manage and control the natural world, we can begin to trust it. Rather than pushing, we can begin to allow. And when we're not fighting, when we're not frantically rowing our boats up the stream, we can begin to align and like see how life is throwing things at us. And instead of like battling and being destroyed by it, once again, not easy, but we can try to harmonize and flow with it. And so back to what Dr. Dyer is saying, rather than learning to manage and control the natural world, we can trust it. Trusting, which is the most important point in the beginning step for this process of simply just living a better life, but becoming a spiritual person, and in this case, becoming a spiritual manifester. And so trusting in yourself, trusting this most evolved natural force includes trusting the paradox of behavior, because we are humans and we are in this realm of duality, which is the physical realm. So there is still these goods and bads and ups and downs, even though we know it's all one thing on the gray areas of the scale. But trusting this most evolved natural include he worded it weird there. That's why I keep pausing. He says trusting this most evolved natural human includes trusting the paradox of behavior described as good and bad, which is what I was trying to get to. Selfish and unselfish, greedy and generous, in the same manner as we respect other life forms by trusting their processes. There is no need to invent an ego that is separate from the divine, from God, if our basic human nature is trusted. See, it's like this flip. It's like once you can, if we actually trust in ourselves and our basic, whatever has got us here, then it begins to totally change in a new way. And if we trust ourselves, Dr. Dyer continues, we know how to avoid interfering with nature, reality, life, God, circumstances, and how to begin to harmonize, how to live in harmony, he puts it. When we know God as an unseen, loving, and accepting power at the heart of everything, allowing us to make our own choices, then it becomes a trusted part of ourselves rather than the other perspective of seeing God, nature, reality as something that we are not a part of, something that is separate from us, and we have to struggle and fight and battle. You can, I mean, it's clear as day to me. I mean, hopefully this is even making sense. There was one comment one time, I loved it. It was hilarious. I don't get too many negative comments, which is great. And so thank you all. But one guy was like, in this video, Chase attempts to read a book. That was a good one. I liked it. All right. The order of nature itself, he continues, is sometimes crooked, right? I mean, our lives, sometimes shitty, and it's sometimes straight. I mean, there are good. And so it is wiggly and unorthodox, he puts it, as seen in the shapes of clouds or mountains. But would you say that some clouds are not as good as the others, or that mountains should be a different way? When we insist on controlling nature or judging it, saying, oh, these jalapeno plants I have should still be growing. I mean, it's not that time. It's the season is in. Like, once again, when you can change your perspective, something as simple and frustrating as not wanting something to be the way it is can really begin to vanish in a miraculous way. It's kind of weird, actually. But once again, back to the point here. When we insist on controlling and forcing and pushing nature and reality, we are interfering with it, which causes chaos, disharmony, or resonance or dissonance. That's what I was trying to think of. We need to straighten out nature. The need, rather, sorry, to straighten out nature shows a distrust. But when we can relax and embrace the infinite variations of reality as being, kind of just it is what it is. But that, if you just stopped there, then it would be difficult to appreciate it. And so saying it is what it is, detaching from the judgment side and allowing the divinity of nature, reality, to flow and unfold through our lives. When we have done this, Dr. Wayne Dyer says, we have begun to tune in to this force, this God force, this universal intelligence, to the divine. And so, he continues, think of yourself as a consciousness being played out by God, just as a wave is a part of the ocean that is being played out by the ocean. This second theory of nature, of God, will promote the kind of trust, the self-trust. Remember, this is all about trusting ourselves because we can't begin to create our lives on purpose and manifest if we don't trust ourselves and don't trust in reality and the wisdom. The name of this second principle, as Dr. Wayne Dyer titled it, trusting in yourself is trusting in the wisdom that created you. And so trust is the main point of all of this. We're somehow going through a very spiritual, philosophical way to find it. But these two theories of God, as we're learning, and we have learned, and we've talked about this many times before on this channel, but can really like screw up our ability to do any of these kind of positive things for ourselves because we see ourselves as terrible innately. And it's not really it's something you think of like consciously, but it's just a background subconscious like belief and these limiting beliefs. Somebody once asked Dr. Dyer, what are the blocks to my happiness? And he said, well, it's very simple, the belief that you have blocks. I don't know if it's that simple, but that is a profound truth. Like if all beliefs that we had any kind of blocks to our happiness were eliminated, then we wouldn't there wouldn't be a problem. And so in the same way, like another, I think it's out of the Course in Miracles or another one of those books, but it's the saying that infinite patience is met with immediate results. So it's like, what? But when you're not waiting anymore, then you've solved the problem. Anyways, the need to straighten out nature shows a distrust. So when we can relax and embrace reality and see ourselves as connected to everything and begin to kind of cultivate an appreciation, then we can begin to trust in that in ourselves. And so, once again, this unseen divine energy is the ocean that your waveform is a part of. You can call it God, you can call it ocean, or anything else. It's once again, if it is everything, then it is all names. So a single name wouldn't be it. This is a profoundly exquisite realization if we can come to this new perspective for ourselves. I'll read the words that Dr. Wayne Dyer says and stop interrupting now. This is a profoundly exquisite realization because with it, you bring to your consciousness the inner awareness that you are actually in all things. This leads to miraculous manifestations in that you are actually connected to all that you desire to manifest. And so finally, you know this if you practice and continue to contemplate this to be, you finally get this to be your reality, your truth, he puts it. But remember the words of the Egyptian sage god Thoth, that a pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation, a constant meditation, a constant ponderation, a rumination, a thinking about it to finally get there. Because it, once again, it doesn't just, or maybe sometimes it could just come in a satori, an aha moment, or an instant enlightenment, as it's known. But usually, I would say it tends to be a much longer internal personal process. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was very randomly a journey into the two theories of nature and God that can really affect our ability to be happy, our ability to trust in ourselves and in our very own nature. And so the choice is, of course, up to any of us, but I mean, I would think you would want to choose the one that gives you more peace, more contentment, a little less suffering. And so that was the main point of the second principle of, once again, the 9 spiritual principles for manifesting or getting everything you want, as Wayne Dyer subtitled the book. And then we went into prayer and trust last week. And that was also very fascinating because a lot of people think about prayer. I'll just briefly go over this with my extrapolations real quick, and then we'll call it a day. But thank you once again for being here. This idea of prayer, though, related to trust now, because so often with prayer, when it comes to God, when we're using that first theory of nature or reality, is it's like, okay, it's separate from us. And so when we're trying to pray to God, this view is often, as Wayne Dyer puts it, a gigantic vending machine in the sky that's going to grant us our wishes when we do good deeds or, go to church on, or, whatever the different reasons or rules that we have made up for ourselves and different dogmas. But this idea of God as the vending machine who's going to give us our wishes when we put in the proper tokens, often in the form of prayers. And so we expect to insert the prayers, and we pull on the knob and hope that God's going to dispense the goodies, Dr. Wayne Dyer says. But the basic premise here is that God is outside of us. And so therefore, what we need also is outside of us. And so we never have it within us. We always have to do something to go get it. And so the vending machine approach says to prayer reinforces and deepens this belief that we are separate from it. And we continue to get stuck in that first theory that we were talking about earlier. And so he says here, I prefer to promote the idea of prayer in its essence as a communion. Or I think of it personally as just like a conversation with yourself. If you're already a part of God, then like your thoughts are God too. Like your fingernails, your everything is it. So it's like you you thinking to yourself is a conversation with God, really, but then there is a different kind. Because if you're a drop in the ocean and you're not the entire ocean, you are connected to it and it is a part of you. However, the ocean is much more powerful. And so there's also that way of thinking about it. But once again, the basic premise of it's either outside of us or we are a part of it, a communion or like a hope from something else. And so praying, Dr. Wayne Dyer says, at this spiritual level then becomes a communing with that which you are a part of. And knowing that force is as close to us as our breath. Interesting way to put it there. But your breath is always with you. And it's very interesting that giving and taking the reciprocity to where you can only take so much. And then you have to like give it back. And it's almost equal amount all the time. There's like this balance. That's another, that's another subject. But he gives us some examples here. He says this may sound like a radical idea that we have this divine power within us. And praying at this level may sound blasphemous to some people, like, oh, you think you're the greatest thing, you know. But he says here, prayer at this level expresses an experience of oneness with reality or divine energy. This, once again, he says, this may sound like a radical or even blasphemous notion to you, but it is the source of all spiritual traditions. Like I was saying earlier, it's like all of these traditions seem to be trying to figure out this same thing. And he gives us a few examples here. Christianity tells us the kingdom of heaven is within you. Islam says those who know themselves know their God. Look within, we get from Buddhism, and you are the Buddha. From Vedanta, a part of Hinduism, Atman, which is individual consciousness or us, and Brahman, which is God or universal consciousness, are one. And yoga, another part of Hinduism, tells us that God dwells within you as you. And then Confucianism gave us heaven and earth and human are of but one body. The Upanishads, another version of Hinduism, gives us by understanding the self, all of this universe is known. And so through these examples, it's the same thing over and over. And this should be a good thing. I find it great. I'm like, yes, all right, this is sinking in. There's correlations. It's lining up. But once again, overcoming our conditioning is the next three words that Dr. Wayne Dyer writes. So, overcoming our conditioning in this area is crucially important. And that's what we need to begin to work on. And then last week, I think we left off in the same spot, but putting those two theories as an overview in connection to this idea of prayer, and then this new perspective of both of those and connecting it to using that as evidence for why we should trust in ourselves and reality. This is what I highlighted last week. I know that this force connects me to everything in the universe, and that by placing my attention on what it is and what I want to attract to myself, I'm really doing nothing more than manifesting a new aspect of myself. That was incredible. That was an incredible sentence by Dr. Wayne Dyer there. That's probably why I highlighted it. That is a mantra, ladies and gentlemen. I know that I am not separate from this vital force, and we have an inner strength. And if you don't believe it, ask for it. You are connected to this strength, and it is impartial. It will come to you, but you have to believe that you are worthy. You have to trust that it can. And so, this inner strength, this inner awareness to handle what confronts us, we have this ability. And so, once again, the mantra, I know that I am not separate from this vital force that we call God, this universal intelligence. And I know that this force connects me, connects you, connects us to everything in the universe. And that by placing our attention on what it is that we want to attract to ourselves, we are really doing nothing more than manifesting a new aspect of ourselves. And that's beautiful to me. I don't know what you think, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know in the comments, but that is beautiful. Peace, then, is the next section that we'll go through, which is the result of creating this kind of trust within yourself. The highest self, Dr. Wayne Dyer reminds us always, the highest self wants us nothing more than to just be at peace, which is the definition of enlightenment. And so, before I just keep going on and on, we'll leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. We'll finish up this chapter next week. And we'll go into the third principle of manifesting, which is you are not an organism in an environment, but you are an enviro-organism. A very interesting choice in titling there, but I love it. It's once again going back to that idea of separateness or oneness and seeing the world as, it's like the idea of the bulldozer, like pushing everything around, and we have to destroy and control, and or this other idea of being a part of it. But anyways, I'll leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much. Once again, I love and appreciate each and every one of you that spends time here with me. Remember, seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through a greater awareness and understanding of the nature of reality, spirituality, psychology, ourselves, so that through this awareness, we can hopefully increase the quality of our lives. And also, remember to seek to discover the hidden mysteries of our history and the lost wisdom of the ages. I almost forgot how to say that part. But also, remember, there is no way to happiness. Why? Because happiness is the way. If all those things we've been telling ourselves, oh, when I get this much and have that, if we can begin to create the ability within ourselves to bring it to life, rather than saying, once I get that, and then hopefully the entire journey is wonderful. I don't know. I mean, you would think if we're no longer reaching for something that is outside of us, once again, because then when we don't have a grasp of it, we don't have it. And then we're screwed. And so if we can begin to create and build that within ourselves, once again, it's not easy, it takes work. But then hopefully the entire journey is wonderful. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Expand the description below the video, and you will find yourself a link to this book so you can get it for yourself, put it on your shelf, and follow along future episodes of this series, or just for personal reference. Physical copies, ladies and gentlemen. Also, a link to my Etsy shop and my landscape paintings. You can check that out. I want to try to make a website soon. Had one a while ago, but we'll see about that. Things in the works. And also a link to C60 Purple Power. Give yourself the gift of health. All right. Thank you. I love and appreciate each and every one of you. And until next time, be the change that you want to see. Be the example you want to set. No, 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 no.